Start recording and we'll just
You
figure
guys
it
are
out.
fighting each other. Oh.
At least now we know how that video is going to start.
So this is very interesting because I feel like, Tom, you are the first guest that we've had who comes from, I mean, you come from a lot of things, but come from traditional media and are now like full-time on the CTV side. And it's really exciting because very much like Flowcode, you are a company that is digital, but very much based in the physical world, right? And so could you give us just a little bit, give us a little synopsis of who you are, what you do, and what your game is?
What's your deal, man?
What is your deal, Tom Donahue?
So,
The
it's
world
funny.
wants to know.
I don't know about that, but Ground Truth. I joined Ground Truth in May of last year. The Ground Truth was prior to my getting there, primarily just a mobile advertising oriented company, and its entire roots are built around real world behavior. And so real world behavior, if you think about it just in terms of like your life, is when you leave the front door of your house, where do you go? And what doors do you open when you go through? Do you go to Starbucks? Do you go to Subway? Do you go to work? Do you go to the gym? Each one of those things starts to tell a story about who you are in the real world. And when you can track that behavior in a way that allows you to start designing audiences that can help advertisers reach those people more efficiently, then you're onto something. What's interesting about your question, Megan, is I actually was in this kind of philosophical discussion with someone last night about the difference between the virtual world and the real world. And there's nothing wrong with the virtual world, except the challenge I always offer people is go and look at the bookmarks on your laptop. Are any of them really who you are when you leave the front door of your house?
No.
They're not. They're
Have you ever done that thing? Who does Google think I am? And it's like the most off base, like, who is this person?
Right.
Sidebar.
Right. So that contextual moment of advertising where, oh, I know something about this person because they watched this thing on their laptop or they shopped for this thing on their computer, it actually doesn't tell you anything. For example, I bought my mom flowers a couple of weeks ago. How would you take that piece of information and then suddenly turn that into a CTV ad that's relevant to me? I'm not a full-time flower shopper. That was just an event that occurred. If I went to a florist, now you might have something in the real world that you can start go, all right, this person is, dedicated to plants or flowers or whatever. So that's kind of like how I look at the real world. I think what Flowcode does is exactly it complements what we do in such a perfect way, because the ability to, Megan, you and I talked about this, the ability for my mom to engage with a flow code inside of a CTV or a linear spot is a moment of brand intimacy that invites her to take a deeper step in the consumer journey. And once she's done that, it opens up first party data. It opens up the opportunity to tell her more about why she should partner with you as, consumer to business. And it gives more context and flavor to what's really happening in the way in which people use the internet and use technology in order to achieve digital advertising needs. So,
Nick, can you tell Tom about you screenshotted a streaming service who will remain nameless. There was a negative ad experience in there that featured a QR code. That was basically when you and I talked about it. It was essentially the big loophole in digital targeting, right? Should I just say, I don't know if this is ringing a bell for you. This is a conversation we had like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, you got to just say it.
Yeah, so I don't remember who. I think it's basically running targeted ads for weight loss.
And it was targeting the teen in the room. And this person posted on Instagram, why are they targeting my teen? I'm all for opting in on ads, but I didn't opt in for my daughter to get served ads. It was not an experience that's going to make that person then go use that service because they've accidentally created a bad experience.
And I actually think we probably need to new client of ours too. So there's like that, but
We'll talk around it. We'll blur and bleep.
that's fine. It's great. It's subject matter for the actual conversation. But the point here is like how are we in our space of delivering accurate messaging to the right people? Like, what is the correct combination of things? How do we unify all of these big screens, little screens, and accurately deliver the correct message to people, and avoid situations like that where you're you know, at worst or at best it's irrelevant, at worst it's brand damaging. Like how do we get better at that?
Yeah, I think that's a really, that's a question for the ages too, Megan, because advertising always has the potential to run afoul of the viewer, right? And that's an egregious example. But I did see one the other night that I thought was interesting that ended up as a trending Twitter topic, which was Applebee's, where they were inserted into a split screen while bombs were going off in Ukraine. And it was like, if you're Applebee's, you're sitting there going like, I don't want that. Why am I doing that? Right. But it was just a moment where the ad just was, scheduled and ran. Right. We had a client a couple of weeks right when this whole Ukraine event started. We had a client reach out to us and say, can you please pull us off of the news publishers that you're running on CTV? And we were like, absolutely. And we excluded all the news content so that they were not going to have an adverse negative brand experience lined up against content that could be just, unsettling and certainly had the potential to create this, this moment where the association of a brand to an otherwise negative event. So it's definitely a challenging thing. Yeah.
Nick, so Nick comes from a media background too, and we've had a lot of conversations. Sorry, I'm like totally dominating this.
No, so here's what's funny. When you look at all of the waveforms in these conversations, like one of us will sort of take over and you can see like, this is all the times Megan talked, Nick was quiet for 3 minutes, but you're fine. You're not dominating. We're having a conversation.
We're really good at this.
Leaving that part in too.
We're really good at this.
There's no formula, Megan. Just bring it.
No, right? I mean, somebody's got to talk about it. Somebody's got to start somewhere. Nick and I have had a lot of conversations about TV measurement, and I think that this is another thing that's like haunting the ages, right? Is like, how do we get better at this? And it's CTV was a lot of fun as a media seller because suddenly you had large screen video with digital metrics and digital targeting, and that's all very exciting. But we've never really been able to kind of fight fight is the wrong word, but there's always there's always value in broadcast. And then like now we're kind of seeing that this behavior shift that everybody said was going to take 10 years, right? This shift from linear to like being completely just like digital media consumers. Like that shift, I remember when we first started selling OTT, Tom. I remember the Tribune broadcasting days, and it was like, outrageously expensive. And the number one question was like, I don't even understand. What is this? Where does this even run? Right?
What is OTT? Who's going to see it?
Right. Yeah. And now here we are, and it's 5 years later. And suddenly like, look at that shift that happened. And it happened arguably, I would say like in two of those 5 years is kind of where we saw that drastic shift happen.
You can almost say that it happened in a couple months in 2020 though.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean,
it's so ubiquitous now that we don't even sense how ubiquitous it is as viewers, as consumers of this content. In other words, when you turn on your smart TV and those tiles pop up and you go, oh, okay, and you click on one of them, you don't know that what you've just done is activate a connected TV moment. You're just grabbing content off the shelf and you're going to consume it when you feel like doing it, right? So there's no more like must see TV. It's just when I want to see TV. And so now all of a sudden you're sitting there and you are absorbing this content thinking that you're just like all of us just are just behaviorally customized to watching content on the television. You've forgotten the fact that you just pulled it through a different pipe. And then all of a sudden a spot comes on and you don't think to yourself, hey, wait a minute, I shouldn't be seeing commercials here. You just accept the commercial. But the moment that you are doing it, you have become part of that ubiquitous life cycle of what we are now dealing with, which is this convergent TV moment, where you have linear in all of its power, glory, reach, and frequency, and you have connected TV with all of its targeting and all of the high quality premium content and the efficiency to deliver and that audience ability. And all of a sudden you have that convergent moment and you say to yourself, wow, if I'm a marketer, how do I split my budgets to really get the best of both of these? Forget that question. That's an easy question to answer. Here's the better question. How do I get the viewer to engage with me in that 30-second moment? That's where a flow code kicks in. That's where you put a QR code in front of that person and you say to that person, I served you this ad because it's relevant to the way in which you behave in the real world. And now I want you to take the next step. I'm asking you to come to me. And when I scan that code and I'm taken to that place, my consumer journey begins. And it's much more, it becomes a flywheel of knowledge for the consumer. It's not just this moment where they go, oh, I guess I'll go get a drink. They're sitting there going like, huh. And it's not even it's not even the uniqueness of a QR code on the screen anymore. It's actually not think, Nick, it's know. I think the specificity of audience capture in companies like Ground Truth, where we have 6.5 million what we call blueprints, which are polygons around retail locations, brick and mortar locations and points of interest around the United States, 6.5 million businesses. So we know when devices are in and out of those businesses, and that raw data starts to inform how audiences behave, and then they start to be able to be bracketed in certain ways. So when I serve an ad to somebody who is in market for camping gear, it's not just kind of like rolling the dice and seeing if it hits. I know that this person's been to Dick's Sporting Goods. I know this person went to REI. I can start to determine whether or not this person will be the most inclined to engage with the ad I'm about to put in front of them. So now I'm Coleman Camping, and I put an ad for Coleman camping gear in front of that person with a QR code, a flow code on there. And all of a sudden that person sits there and says, huh, I do need a 4-person tent, right? Mm-hmm. And then they scan that code and it takes them to that Coleman landing page, that flow code page. And once they get to that page, they're invited to participate in a much more intimate way. And I love the potential for this, this frontier that we're all on right now, because I think what it does is it creates, it doesn't just create an attribution model. It's not just clicks on a big screen. It's now this moment where you can actually take somebody into a place, and because it's served relevant or relative to their interests in the real world, and pull them into the experience in a different way, willingly, I might add. So these aren't fat finger moments. Hold up a phone and scan something is a it's a specific intentional moment.
What we love to say, Tom, you can't accidentally scan a flow code.
Yeah. So it's funny. Like we ran a code towards the end of the year in 21, and we got, it was a CTV campaign. It was a relatively small campaign. It was about $25,000. And we got about, I don't know, maybe 700, I think it was 724 scans. And it was for a QSR, fast casual restaurant. They were freaked out by that. And because the number of impressions we served was, quite large given the $25,000 that they invested, but the number of scans they got blew their mind. And I'm like, that's nothing. If you really want to do this right, show me what you're doing on linear right now, right? I will rock your world in a linear environment. And that's the place I want to get us to at Ground Truth. I want us to, the CTV part, I think, is relatively easy to do, but the scale is also compacted. It's on the linear side that I really want to start driving change within Ground Truth using flow code and the partnership that we have in order to drive that behavioral change for marketers.
Well, so let's talk for a second then, because I think that this is like, I mean, this is such a DSM conversation right now. But so like talking about the relationship between CTV and broadcast, non-traditional and traditional, and the role that flow code plays in kind of uniting it. I think for a long time we've looked at these two kind of categories of arguably the same experience, right? Same experience for the viewer. They've always been kind of at odds, right? It's like, oh my God, are we robbing Peter to pay Paul? Are we cannibalizing our audience? And like, can you go on the record and like, just what is the relationship? How should we be looking at CTV and broadcast together?
As I said before, I think the term that we all need to start to really get comfortable with when we're talking with other marketers is convergent TV. It is where you get the best of linear, which is reach and frequency at scale, with the best of connected TV, which is targeting, high efficiency, premium content, and the ability to get digital reporting and digital targeting capabilities built in. When you have those two powerhouses working with each other, they complement one another. You are no longer robbing Peter to pay Paul. You're not saying like, well, peel off 50 grand of your linear budget and give it to me and I'll run this. Why? Do both. If you can do both, if you can afford linear, you can afford to do both. That's just a fact, because what you're really trying to do is drive some type of influential behavioral moment with a consumer. Where it's adaptable is what we're talking about today, right? Which is the ability to make both screens actionable. When you can make both screens actionable and a consumer sees that spot and they take that, as you said, like that that kind of prescribed moment where you can't accidentally scan this. You've taken that step on linear and you've taken that step on CTV. It's the combination that I think marketers are driving for in big screen moments.
So tell me about what you think. Have you ever bought pants on your television?
No.
Have you ever bought pants on your phone?
Yes, I have.
Like, I think there's something to be, all of our ads are being more connected, better measured. Is it going in front of the right person? Sometimes ATSC3 or YouTube TV, whatever it is, you've got the option to click now. Mm-hmm. I still believe though, and it has to come with the right messaging in the spot. It's not just put a code on and people start scanning automatically. But if you want them to purchase the stuff that, I have to type in all of my measurements for pants if I want to get them. I'm not going to click over on my remote. That's one of the things that I think is really cool about what we're doing with these codes, but it's not the end of our options.
So I wrote something a few weeks ago, and it was driven largely by a conversation Megan and I had in December about using, if we think about advertising as kind of the doorstep, right? All a QR code is a key to open the front door. It's the invitation for the consumer to step into the thing that you are inviting them to step into. It's up to them if they want to do it, right? So if you're watching TV and a pants commercial comes on and you're like, I'm not buying pants on TV. It's not because you won't buy pants on TV. It's because you can't buy pants on TV. But if you're watching connected TV and that spot comes on and there's a QR code and you go, I need pants and those are kind of nice. You're going to have that moment where you might step in and take action, right? That front door, that's what we're trying to open with consumers. Now, Nick, I'll say this I'll say this. I think where linear is going to continue to fall behind and where it really needs to get its act together is in targeting. If the best you can offer somebody is the DMA and some program that you think is your, age, gender demo,
Yeah.
then you're dead. I mean, you're already dead because one, there are less eyeballs watching linear TV. And two, you literally are just really targeting content. And that's just not a good solution. And I think they have to get more refined in that. And there are ways to do that as well. And that is by analyzing the output of a linear campaign so that you can refine it more specifically and intentionally. So that by the time you get to that pants ad, Nick, you're actually serving the ad with a QR code to a more refined audience. And when you can do that, you're not just buying, Big Bang Theory at 8 o'clock and hoping for the best, right? You're
Yep.
buying something very specific and intentional, but you're adding that additional engagement metric with the QR code, where flow code can take somebody to that place where they can then say, well, I'm a 36 waist and a 32 inseam, and I like straight leg. And all of a sudden they go, okay, fatty, and then your pants are on the way, right? And by the way, I just gave myself a 36-inch waist, and I don't know if that's true because I've been wearing sweatpants for 2 years. So we'll
Same.
find out.
Hard thing.
I think if there's a moral of this story, it's flow code. Now you can buy pants on TV.
That's it. That's what
That's
we've
it.
been going for.
Cut.
That's the opus, I think. That's really just the main goal that we
We've
have.
been looking for a tagline and now we've got it.
That's it.
But you're right. And it's so, okay, how do you say something? I think everyone on this call understands, the value and the options now on targeting, capturing people in solid messaging, and then giving them something to go to and the chain of marketing just got super long. But what do you say to a sales agent in middle market America who doesn't have a digital budget that they need to meet? Like, how do you make this as easy for them to understand? Because this is a lot of new stuff. And I don't know if my mid Nebraska station is gonna buy into it that quick. How do we teach that?
Yeah, Nick, I think that's a really good question. I don't know if mid Nebraska is any different than New York City.
Sure.
Spots are spots, buyers are buyers, and you are targeting according to the place in which those people live and the services that are available to them in that location, right?
Mhm.
So let's just pick Kearney, Nebraska, for example, just because it's in Nebraska.
It's there.
So it's a relatively small community, 33,000 people. They probably watch 3 or 4 channels if they're watching linear TV, right?
Mhm.
Okay, what are we serving them? We're serving them local car ads. We're serving them local restaurant ads. We're serving them the things that they're going to be spending their money on in that local community. Yeah. All right. Now you insert the QR code where you're taking this a step further and you're saying to that salesperson, wouldn't it be great if you could go back to the car dealer or the restaurant and say, would you like to measure the efficacy of this campaign? Or would you like to invite people who see your spot to take a deeper step into the conversation you want to have with them? And now they go, well, yeah, how do we do that? And you're like, well, have you heard of QR codes? And they go, yeah, who hasn't heard of QR codes? I saw the Coinbase commercial, right?
Mhm.
Everybody thinks they're smart now. And you say, well, let's slip one in there and let's see how it goes, right? And now all of a sudden you got somebody's attention and they go, what do you mean? And you're like, give me one of your give me one of your flights that are running right now. We'll embed a QR code in it. Let's pull it back in and let's run it again. And let's see whether or not we get any activity off of that. And the proof will be in the pudding when they get back 906 scans for a schedule. They're going to sit there and go, what just happened? And that's where the education kicks in. That's where you folks say, here's what just happened, right? I'm doing this with the sales force here at Ground Truth, where I'm trying to get them to understand, folks, if you're talking to your buyers who are predominantly mobile buyers, as we continue to grow our CTV business and our CTV business continues to be more attractive as an alternative model to traditional mobile advertising, I want QR codes front and center, because I believe that, like CTR on a mobile campaign, the ability to have some type of attribution validates the impressions that are being served. And if you can tell that story, suddenly that linear campaign that just produces a TV schedule. Megan, you remember this when, somebody would show up and just be like, here's where you ran, right? And it's just an Excel spreadsheet with a bunch of spot dates and times on it.
And it makes you, like, you look at it and you're like, I don't even know what this is. Like,
yeah,
it means
and
nothing to me.
And the salesperson runs because they're like, to them, it doesn't mean anything either. It's just like some validation that their money was spent. But
Yep.
the reality of that is if you could stop that right there and say, can we make this more efficient in the next flight? And they go, yeah, how can we do that? And you're like, bang, and you hit them with what you want to do. They don't need to be told. They'll see it. They'll understand.
Because you just explained it to them.
I can explain this to anybody. It's not a hard concept, Nick.
No,
you know that.
I do. And that, but I think there's a lot of reticence to change, especially when it's on the big rectangle, because that's not what we've always done there. And how am I going to get analytics on these spots? And that sounds like it's out of my pay grade to make that decision. And these are like the conversations that we end up having with different departments. Frankly, every smart person who talks about these and gets to look and play with the options understands and goes for it. The biggest thing is being ready to open up and say, I want to be a little bit better. I want to change what I'm doing. I want to have a new option.
Taking responsibility and earning viewership, right? It's the idea of like, you want people to engage with you. You want people to consume your product, whether you're a publisher or a brand. And it's like, okay, well, what are you doing to encourage that? And it circles us back to the idea that it should be based on real world behavior. It should be based on what that consumer is actually looking for. And like, I don't know, we could talk all day about good creative and all of the variables and things like that. But yeah, as publishers and as brands, it's important to be on the hook for that first party data, for that first party interaction.
Do we want to give Tom a moment to like kind of wrap up? We got another meeting to go to, Tom, but
yeah, go for it.
Okay, so Nick, like it's a great question. And Megan knows me really well. I'm super aggressive. And so here's the way I would do it. I would say to an advertiser, how would you feel if you were watching TV tonight and one of your competitors ran a spot with a QR code in it? And then they would say, well, I don't know. How am I supposed to feel? Then I'd say, let me ask it a different way. Would you be curious enough to scan it? And they might say, yeah. And you'd say, guess what you just lost? You just lost a prospect. And so if you don't think this is important for you, some of your competitors might start thinking it's important for them. So why don't we step you into this game and get ahead of them? And now you're having, and by the way, you can do that with broadcast sellers too. You can just say like, oh, that's no problem. Your company is doing great, right? We'll just go across the street and talk to your competitor. You know what? KYZ doesn't want to do it. We'll do XYZ. Who gives a crap? I really don't care. I just want somebody to drive behavioral change on the big box. And I think that's not as hard as we're all thinking it might be. But you're right, Nick, there is some reticence to driving that change. And I think that's kind of the three of us. This is our job, is to be the vanguard of that.
this is where we all yell Vanguard and charge into battle.
Vanguard, sweatpants.
Yes. The weird pants runner we've got through this one now is
Nick, bring forth the sweatpants. Onward.
here. I'm gonna stop recording.